Thank you for joining me. Thank you for pulling me up on your screen. Now that I'm here, we may as well have a little talk. And what is there to talk about? I think the best things to talk about have everything to do with our quality of being. At the end of the day, we exist in our quality of being, aka our consciousness. Our perceptions guide our lives. And although this statement seems very obvious, many of us consistently forget that actually there is no objective quality out here that forces us to feel a certain way or maintain certain perceptions. Rather, everything that happens inside, everything that happens in thought, in emotion, within the fabric of our inner world has everything to do with how we choose to energetically operate and conduct ourselves in relation to this canvas of a world. Now, I say this canvas of a world because it indeed is our canvas. The world, depending on our state of being, depending on our quality of being, our quality of consciousness, appears in a different way. And you know this to be true. This isn't some philosophical musing that you don't already understand. When you feel a certain way, the world appears this way. When you think a certain way, the world appears that way. We all know what it's like to get out of a rut, to learn from our mistakes, or to make a shift in our lives because, change begs to be actualized. So we all know what it's like to go from a limited state into a more expanded state. But humanity at large seems to know nothing about this ever-present subjectivity. We think the world objectively forces us to react in a way that has nothing to do with us, but everything to do with the world. We may have beliefs that we find immovable because of how the world is. We develop routines, and before we know it, we're stuck in those routines. We develop patterns, and before we know it, we become caricatures of ourselves, just going about life without really detaching from the attachments we don't even know we're clinging to. It takes consistent reminders unto ourselves for the kind of guidance that allows a beautiful awareness to consistently spring forth from the muck of this realm. Material existence is hard. Yes, there are many, seemingly endless cruel things going on in this world, and we can absolutely abuse our attention to, feel imprisoned. And yet nobody is holding you hostage. There's a world outside of the world that you think only exists outside, and you can take a walk out there. It's all what you make of it, baby. That's essentially what I'm saying. But if you do get lost in the sauce, then take a few bunny hops back, reframe yourself, reignite yourself, figure out what could change in order for things to feel more comfortable. We have to listen to our emotions. Our emotions exist as the barometer to our spiritual state. Do we feel a sense of ease and comfort and joy with our decisions and with our processing of experience of the outer? If we do, then that's a very good sign. But if we feel sad, if anxiety arises, if shame and guilt, and anger and contempt shows itself, then that is a warning sign from the innermost. Our soul uses the territory of our emotional body to let us know if we're being authentic or if we're not, if we're aligned with what is true or if we still are attached to illusion. And this realm, this experience is full of illusion, and most of that illusion and delusion is self-generated. It's common in this modern age to think our emotions result not from some spiritual condition, but from a purely psychological one. So if we feel all of these emotions deemed negative, well, we have the opportunity to call that a condition or a disease. I have depression. I have an anxiety disorder, we may say. I am socially anxious. It's something that's a part of me. Yeah. There's plenty of ways to excuse ourselves from awareness and from discipline and from the great work that we must consistently undertake so we don't let ourselves go. Yeah, we have the option to not listen to the voice of the divine. But that means we're fools. The wisest thing to do is to follow the breadcrumbs within the quality of our being. If the quality isn't the quality that feels enriching and alive, then that's a sign that the representation we have of the world and of ourselves and the behaviors that result from that representation probably needs some adjustment. I refer to Arthur Schopenhauer's The World as Will and Representation, quite a good book for those into philosophy. The world is my representation. This is the beginning of the book, and it sums this entire concept up. The world is my representation. This is a truth valid with reference to every living and knowing being, although man alone can bring it into reflective, abstract consciousness. Everything that in any way belongs and can belong to the world is inevitably associated with this being conditioned by the subject, and it exists only for the subject. Therefore, no truth is more certain, more independent of all others, and less in need of proof than this, namely, that everything that exists for knowledge, and hence the whole of this world, is only object in relation to the subject, perception of the perceiver. In a word, representation. To sum this up, it may seem a bit complex. Everything we think exists out here is only represented in here, in here. Therefore, it is up to us to be the interpreters of this world. And if we don't like the interpretation, if we're not vibing with the very set of attributes that we claim exists in the world and thus affects us objectively, then we can decide to change the course of our representations of the world. This means allowing change, not clinging, allowing ourselves the opportunity to wipe the slate clean. Of course, we accumulate knowledge or wisdom. Our experiences inevitably do shape our character, the values we hold, and how we behave. But that doesn't mean we are simply at the mercy of what has happened. Now is a new moment, and if we have not been in the flow, then now can mark a moment in which we let what no longer serves die, so the tides of change won't feel encroaching on our well-being or self-concept. We can cling. Oh, we can cling. Things have to be this way, we may say. Things are this way, and that's how it is. I think we all should be very clear with ourselves. What do we expect? Why do we operate in this or that way? What is it that we allow into our lives? Do we sustain our happiness coming from the attachment to outer rewards? Do we think others hold the keys to our own hearts? I think these questions must always be asked. We should look in the mirror, at least every now and then, and determine, how are we living? How are we perceiving? And how is our livingness, and how are our perceptions shaping the course of our lives and of our consciousness and ultimately of our souls? So let's be aware, let's be mindful. Let's know that there is way more power in the energetics we allow to reign supreme in our lives, more than the world will ever tell us. But aren't I in the world? I guess so. So maybe I am the world telling you this. So maybe there's a ton of contradictions that we must accept. Maybe I'm a contradiction you must accept. We like to say, we're awakened, I'm awakened. I know this truth, I know that truth. I'm awakened. To me, awakening has little to do with waking up to the supposed objectivity out here. Awakening has everything to do with the dormant power that wishes to become alive once again. I think every living soul feels this. Deep down, there is this intrinsic beauty and sacredness and joy and comfort that exists behind all of the shadows we allow in and the shadows we sustain. It takes a lot of courage to move away from the ways of the world and dive into the absolute wonder that just knows it all to be fine, knows it all to be perfect, knows it all to be completely within our power.
For those of us determined to truly break free, actualizing ourselves is the most important pursuit. Our spiritual state translates to our day-to-day reality. The condition of our soul can be known in any moment by allowing true, honest confrontation to guide us. Do the decisions we make correspond to the ideas we subscribe to of reality and of ourselves? Do we act in a way that is in alignment with our innermost values? We can fantasize all we want. We may attach ourselves to as many spiritual concepts that we deem higher or truthful, but all divine notions of how we and the world are or should be prove meaningless without authentically ordering ourselves into a being that we respect and love. Being logically aware that certain divine truths exist is not the same thing as exempling the divine. Or to say in another way, we can mentally masturbate ourselves with ideas and investigations all we'd like, but until we learn to listen to the wisdom of our emotions, we cannot achieve any spiritual freedom. Our emotions reflect to us the energies that we have set in motion. On the stage of life, when our performance is in sync with our truest selves, we feel relaxed, a sense of purpose and direction, and a comfortable warmth. But when we behave out of sync with our truest selves, out of sync with our hearts, we feel uncomfortable emotions. The conscience exists for this reason. The conscience lets us know if we are aligned or misaligned with the innermost self that so desperately wants to come forth. A sense of sadness or depression, anxiety, shame, guilt, worry, fear, etc., arises to let us know when we have let ourselves slip into a mode of being that is unsound or damaging to our trajectory. Our so-called negative emotions are always a direct result, a reflection from the habits and patterns we play out, which deep down we find dishonorable. It's impossible to hide from ourselves and the effects of our causes because our emotions cannot be turned off. We cannot lie to ourselves about our authentic emotional state. This, of course, is not the popular conception of what unpleasant emotion is and why it is felt. We hear that there are depressive and anxious disorders of the mind that emerge not as a spiritual response meant to guide us, but as an illness, something that has no intrinsic, depthful meaning. And it can be quite alluring to accept this belief, because it gives those who accept it a way out of true confrontation. If we are crippled by sadness, for instance, we may call that depression and blame the depression as an infliction, maybe as a genetic anomaly or undeserved disease, rather than a call to look in the mirror and deal with things in our lives that really need to be dealt with. Do not misunderstand me. We are here to feel the vast array of emotion that can be felt. We require suffering as a tool to get closer to wisdom everlasting. This explains the harm in so-called New Age thinking, which has been accused of spiritual bypassing or labeling unpleasant feelings as negative. We don't become greater just because we imagine greatness. It is necessarily our suffering which guides us to a divine reshaping of our conduct and ultimately of ourselves. We cannot fool ourselves into a happy or content or fulfilled existence. We cannot shortcut our way to authenticity and truth. We cannot shortcut our way to a heart-centered reality. The heart, being the source of all divine intelligence, exists at the center of our electromagnetic toroidal fields, also called the aura. The heart is, therefore, the seat of the soul, the greatest compass we have. And when we are out of touch with the heart's voice, our uncomfortable feelings act as warnings to heed, so we can get back to connecting with that gorgeous voice. To shine clarity on our emotional lives is to allow the voice of the heart to come through. If our inner child's pain goes unnoticed and undealt with, well, the inner child's pain will manifest somewhere, somehow in our lives, and often in a very unexpected way. Coherence is the state of being we find ourselves in when our words, thoughts, intentions, actions, and perspectives of the world all line up. It's quite obvious that humans can speak words whilst playing out character traits incompatible and incongruent with those words. You know what I mean. When all aspects of us do not form a unified whole, which is what coherence is, we exist in incoherence, leading to the sensation of emotional despair, fright, and brokenness. Now, what happens if we don't listen to our inner compass? What if we don't listen to the conscience? What happens when we actively disregard the signs of separation from holistic divine awareness? Well, you already know the answer. What happens is we live dysfunctionally, and this dysfunction can create our fate. These bodies we're in, these tangible forms, which are representatives of our intangible, spiritual forms, are on a quest. And in this quest, how we conduct ourselves is how we direct our soul's trajectory. Some of us, however, might not care about our immortal condition. But what about others? What about the cosmos at large? We are blind if we think our dysfunction only affects us. Every cause has an effect, not just on ourselves, but on our surroundings, on the souls we do interact with, and we could say on the entire universe. It's no joke. Our conduct acts as a message to the universe. How we arrange and conduct our lives is a kind of testament to how the universe should arrange itself. Let's take gluttony, for example, the overindulgence and overconsumption of food, drink, drug, or wealth items. We might think that a man's gluttony is just an act of violence and sin against himself, but it is just as much an act of violence and sin against those around him. Every droplet of rain that falls to the ground changes the soil irreversibly. In today's day and age, there seems to be little restraint when it comes to the temptations of hedonism, of degeneracy, of moral bankruptcy. While the divine feminine is crucial and seeks integration in our hearts and souls, the sacred masculine, a seemingly dying energy, also called order, proves very much needed. To not fall into the abyss of ourselves, we require a healthy dose of order so the forces of chaos don't eat us alive. We cannot avoid the void. Our unpleasant emotions should empower and enrich us with the inspiration to order ourselves in the face of a world that, underneath its facade, advocates the opposite.